What's up? Hey, let's make a belt. This thing's awesome. It's a great beginner project. Relatively simple. Unfortunately, a little bit more expensive than most beginner projects, but solid item that will last for years and years to come. Stay tuned. I'll hit the description with everything you might need and where I got everything and all your measurements. But stay tuned and let's get this thing built. We are going to get together tonight a belt with a Horween Natural. It's going to be 1.5 inches wide, and you can see this is pretty hardy here. It's about a 9-ounce natural Horween, which is one of my favorites, and this buddy of mine, it's his absolute favorite. We're going to pair it with a navy blue flat wax cord there. That's a 0.8 millimeter. And well, yeah, we're gonna put this together. I have a brass buckle. I got these at the same place. So Buckle Guy is my go-to for my Horween. They have the belt blanks that you're looking for, and they also have the buckles to match. These come in gold, I want to say polished and matte, solid brass, and then also black. So this is a relatively standard one. I like it. It's pretty simple. They do have some that are a little bit more intricate, but for me, this is pretty good standard. And like I said, this Horween came from there too. They have a fair amount of colors for Horween and a fair amount of width. So they generally only come in like that 8-9 ounce range. I don't see Horween, at least in the natural, much higher than that. But you can get some others, Wicket and Craig, and some of those other veg tan leathers, and they go up into the 10 and 11 ounce range. But for this project, Horween Natural, 1.25 inch width. Got a brass buckle, and let me show you some of the tools that we'll need tonight to complete this. And some will be nice to have, and some will be have to have. But we'll kind of work through and show you what you need. All right, so obviously you're going to need a belt blank and you're going to need a buckle. Any will do. This is just a heel buckle here. These are the first ones I've tried and I really like them, so they are very solid. You got your belt blank here. Now, if you have an oblong punch, this is a nice to have because you're going to have to punch a hole to get this buckle to feed through right here. And so it is nice to have. You don't absolutely have to have it, and I'll show you a workaround when we get there. Some scissors, a razor, a ruler. You might need this for the length. If you have these will be punches here. These will punch the ends. This will be the flip, and this will be the final end. Edge beveler, some wing dividers are pretty nice to have. Skiving tool, that's going to be important for that buckle to go on. This is just in case it gets real. Something to, I choose Tokenol, something to lay those edges down and to give it a nice finish on those edges, and then obviously something to stitch with. I have done some of these with some brass hardware and all, but today I'm just going to stitch this one per request. All right, to start with, again, these come in about, I think they're 55 to 60 inches that you get, so you have a pretty wide variety. I know the size on mine. What I usually do just to get a perfect fit is when I make a belt for someone, I ask them what the hole is that they currently wear from the tip of the fold or wherever the leather is all the way down until their hole that they like to wear it on. And then that's where I set my center hole for them. And then I do a hole, 2 holes forward, two holes back, and then I'll complete the end at a certain distance. So we'll review that when I do. So I already know my sizing for this one, but for now we're going to work on this front part. I have already cut. I basically just took my punch here and punched my first end. Now what I'm going to do is I want to establish what that fold is going to be, where that buckle is going to go. This is a little bit too thick for me. I don't like that fold like that because it creates too much of a gap in here. So when I have that buckle in there, there's just too much wiggle room. So I am going to skive this down a little bit just so I can get that fold in there. Even if I just take off maybe a millimeter or so, not too much at all, but probably let's see, yeah, about 2 to 3 ounces, I guess I'd say, that I want to get down to. So that'll just have a little easier fold, and then I want to skive down here so that just lays nicely against and kind of creates a seamless from the leather to leather to leather here. So because I'm going to be binding those together like so. Now keep in mind, we're also going to have a loop in here. We'll have a fixed loop in here to help with that, the long end of the belt that goes through there. And so that'll be, I usually skive down a little bit in here too. I don't want to get it too thin because I don't want this to get weak. But like I said, this is just a little bit too much for me. There's a little bit too much wiggle room. So I will start to skive that down. And I'm also looking here, and I kind of already got my holes. I'm going to have to punch. My oblong punch is going to have to go, you can kind of see where I have it marked here. So I obviously want it in the middle. But it's going to have to basically fill this fold right here so it can wrap around this buckle. And it has to completely fill this right here. So I'll show you that, and I'll kind of give you the measurements of what that ends up being. But for now, I'm just going to get the skiving a little bit. I've already punched this hole. I'm going to get the skiving to keep this down. And let's see, I have, at this point, I have folded down about 2 3/4 of an inch. So that'll be from kind of fold all the way down to the tip, and that'll give me enough room. Again, I know how much, did I tell you right? Yeah, and so I know how much length I need, and I'm gonna have plenty of excess. So that'll be plenty for me here to include a loop, still be able to attach it here, and then put two nice lines of stitching in there to keep this thing together. So I'm gonna get the skiving here. One thing I like to do when I'm skiving too, I will bend this over and I'll take my scratching awl and just kind of give myself, make myself a little line in there. See if you can see it. Yeah, it's a very faint line, but you can kind of see where I'm heading right there. So that way I can start my skiving there and work my way back. And then when I fold it, it should hide it from there. So just something to keep you in line and to keep you a nice edge on this side. Now, if you're new to skiving, just be patient with it. If you have a machine that can do it, you're probably not watching this video. But if you don't and you're hand skiving, just be patient if you're new with it. This is the one I like to use. I know it's big and bulky, and I have, let's see, I have this type as well. I have never found that I like it at all, so just stays to the side. But yeah, just be patient with it. You're not trying to take off too much. I got down here where it's still thick enough where it's gonna withstand some time. But then again, it kind of doubles over and it thins up, I think, pretty nicely. So I'm pretty happy with that. You always want to make sure it's both on same sides, that it's even, because if you're too heavy on one side and not enough on the other side, then your buckle's going to sit at a slant. So keep that in mind. And then at this time, because you're folding this over, what I'm going to do is already go ahead and start my edge beveling here, because once we attach that buckle, we won't be able to get in there. And then once we attach our stitching and our loop here, we'll have a hard time kind of maneuvering in and out. So I'm going to go ahead and just get my edges beveled and then probably run some token all over it with my slicker, just to get ahead of it so I don't have to go back. And I can still try to fill in later, but it'll just be a little bit easier now before I get everything attached. Alright, so at this point I just touched them up a little bit, nothing special. And that's what I love about this. It pretty much creates a nice patina and it matches that leather perfectly. So some of them you have to dye if they have some pretty rough edges. You see how these edges are pretty raw, but once you throw some Tokonole on there, they pretty much blend right in. So so now I got here, what I'm going to do is get my wing dividers. And I just want to make sure I have a nice starting point. And you just go very lightly if you have wing dividers, especially on this natural Chromexcel here. It takes it very easily. So what I like to do is take my little oblong punch and just kind of give myself a little start here. And I'm going to work my way down. I know I'm going to need about 2.5 of these. Now this is a quarter inch, half inch. Little over half inch actually. Yeah. And so I'll give you the total measurements at the end here. But I do have a punch, so I am going to punch it in there, and I'll show you what I do as far as testing out the buckle once I do get this hole punched. I don't think I showed my maul in there. Obviously, you're going to need one of these if you got a punch. Alright, so that's 2. Let me see how that does on the buckle here. I don't think that's going to be enough. And you'll know when it's not enough. It just won't fit right. Alright, so I want to be able to wrap. Actually, that's going to be just right. So I want to be able to cover it on the back side here, make sure I'm getting all the way over, and then also on the front side here, making sure there is some room to spare. So I actually really like that. Let me see how, get you a measurement on that. And then I'll clean up that inside. All right, so I am about 29, let's say 30 centimeters, or 3 centimeters, I'm sorry, 3 centimeters long here, and that started about, let's see, 5.5 centimeters from the tip here. So 5.5 centimeters down, and then 3 centimeters long for this particular buckle. Now, you might have a different buckle, but for this particular one, it was enough to carry. You can see kind of the weight of that buckle there. So, so yeah, what I'll do now, I'm actually going to take some Tokonol just to kind of clean this up in there. And actually, the buckle can do it itself. This can actually use as a as something to kind of slick it down. But I usually take a some sandpaper or an emery board and just fit it in there just to kind of get some of the excess off. You can also kind of lift and cut if you'd like to, but just to kind of sand that little nub off right there from where my... Now, little trick. If you don't have an oblong punch and you have a hole punch, punch a hole here, punch a hole here, and then get your ruler and then just carry that straight line forward on either side, and that should get you a nice clean punch in there as well. You obviously got to take your time, make sure you're not running through it too far, but that's kind of a workaround if you don't have an oblong punch, and maybe not doing too many of these. So punch hole, and then just take your ruler and then connect the dots, and it should give you a nice straight line in there. All right, what I'm doing here, I'm actually lining this up, squaring this up, and just drawing a nice straight line, because I've done these freehand before, and I got myself into some trouble. But let's see if you can see there. There's too much glare. But just a little stitching line, just so I know where I'm going. I have found, so for the inch and, probably need something underneath that, don't I? For the 1.25 inch, I have found that this 3.1 millimeter, I just got these from Tandy, and these are interchangeable. And so they're 3.1 spread apart. And what that does is it actually leaves there an eighth. It's an eighth of an inch in between each diamond there. And it also leaves me an eighth of an inch on either side. So I'm going to line that up. Make sure I'm centered there on that line. I'm going to give it a punch here. I always like to put my indentation first just to make sure I'm out right on there. Then I'll set it in. Alright, so now I got my line here. All I'm going to do is fold that over, put that buckle in there, make sure it fits right, and then I'm going to punch that through the other side and we'll get it stitched up. Alright, so I replaced the buckle in there. I got my stitches already started. I make sure all this is in place. I'm going to lay those right back inside the holes I just punched. Make sure it's all square, and I'm going to finish out punching through. Alright, now again, I have the 0.8. You could use a bigger, heavier if you wanted, up to the 1 millimeter, possibly 1.2 for sure for a belt. This has worked fine for me, the 0.8. But yeah, I'm just going to start here, work my way all the way back, and then basically do a double stitch and hide the thread back in here. So my stitching here, I'm going to be I'm going to be 8 millimeters from the tip here down to my stitch line, and then 8 millimeters here from the tip to there. So that way I know it's even, I know it's square, and then it also works to fit perfectly around that buckle. I did add some contact cement just to help me on my stitching right here. So I'm gonna clamp that down, put the buckle on, clamp it down, and get my stitching laid in there. Now I do have a stitching horse here, which I feel like I am cheating a bit, but if you can get one of these, it took me about 1.5 years into leather craft before I realized how important they are and how helpful they can be. And so I would highly recommend if you get one. Doesn't have to be anything special, but it gives you an extra set of hands that you just sometimes you need. And so it holds that project in there nice, and you can just get to work on these stitches here. If you do have or you haven't done much stitching and you'd like to learn, I do have a video I can link in there as well, and I think I'll add it to the playlist. I think I'll add it to the playlist of my just some of my beginner leathercraft projects. So all right, so I've gotten all the way down here. Usually I would have started, I start and end with a to lock my stitches in, but in this case I'm just going to double all of them up. So that's a pretty nice clean stitch there. So I'm going to work my way back, and hopefully it'll do just right. A little tip for stitching: if you want clean stitch lines, repeat the same thing over and over. The more consistent you can be with where the needle's going through, where it goes through on the other side, where you push through, the better those stitches will be. I just recently started getting some Ritza tiger thread. I don't have it in the navy blue that he wanted, but it's going to be my go-to thread from here on out. And I do need to put together just the different sizing and some of the different projects you can use them for. I think that'll be helpful. I know when I first started my, I didn't have any idea how much the sizes were or anything like that. So now I'm here. I'm going to actually hide this stitch. You can kind of see I poked through and then came out the middle here. I'm going to do the same thing on the back, and then I'll tie my knots and end that stitch on the inside. Then from there, we're going to create a loop, get another stitch, and we'll get to finish this thing up. All right, so I work a lot with Horween Natural. I actually have some in a 5.5 ounce weight. So I'm gonna use that for my loop. If you don't, just use the excess that you may have. So I'm gonna have about, shoot, I think I'm gonna have like a foot or something of excess left here. And so you could also make a loop just from there. But again, I work with this so much and I have a lot of it, so I'm just going to use a little bit smaller weight just so I don't have to skive that down that much. It is going to be going in here. Now, this part does get a little tricky. If you've never made loops before, skive one end here. Obviously not as wide as the actual project itself, but the way I measure it, just to get my measurement right, I lay it inside underneath, so that's where it's going to go. And then I take this other half of the belt and I double it in there because it's going to have to accommodate that whole entire belt. And then I'll wrap it around and then I'll make my measurement from there. So all I have to do, and it doesn't have to be perfect, you do want it to account again for both straps because that's the point of it. And then it also has to go underneath this fold here. So you just make a big cheeseburger right there. So hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, lay the first piece under there, wrap it around both layers, and then what I'll do is I'll make a little finger with my, or excuse me, a little mark with my finger, and then I'll just cut right there. I'll skive the back side. So there's my cut mark. I can just cut that with scissors. I'm gonna skive this side here. It's gonna match up with that side. And then I'll have my loop. And what I'll do is just put 2 or 3 stitching across here, and then I'll show you how to attach that once I make that. But all right, I got my loop here, and I ran some token all on the edges here too, because that's gonna be tough to clean up at the end. It is, I forgot to mention, this is about 16 millimeters. There's no set hard and fast rule, but I do like them a little bit thicker. So, you know, It's whatever you'd like. But at this point, you have a stitch and you have this end that should still be open. You're gonna have to feed this all around. Flip it over, go to your empty side here, and feed this all the way down now. So it can sit right there where you want it. What you can do too at this point is just double check. Not that I've ever done it before, but just double check that this does indeed fit and accommodate your, the other end of the strap. Keep in mind it will, well, if you cut it that way, you're gonna have a shape like this, so it'll slide through a little easier than this box shape right here. But just make sure it does fit before you attach it on there, because that could cause some problems. But I'm gonna set that. I kind of like where that's sitting right there. Let's see, that right there is, again, you'll kind of feel the flex lessen when you get it in the spot where you like it. So I am about 13 millimeters from my stitch line is where this is sitting here, and I'm feeling it, and I kind of like how that's laying right there. So all I'm gonna do, contact cement inside, top bottom of this loop here, top and bottom, and then right there I'm gonna set this down, and then I'm gonna put another straight stitch line right towards the bottom, so it should end up just below it here. I don't want to go too low, but I do want to make sure I'm covering everything. And so we'll put another stitch line, and then we'll contact cement everything and see where we are. All right, so at this point I got my 2 stitches, my loop, and what I'm going to do is measure. I measure without the buckle, so just from the leather down, and I've been burnt a few times, and it is costly when you do. So I'm going to go to 36, get my first hole right there, and what I'll do from there is go about an inch, make another hole, so I'll probably go back 2. So I'll go back to the 34, do 1, do 2, and then I'll do 2 ahead. So I'll do 1, do 2. So basically I'll end up with 5 holes, and then the middle one being the one that they requested. From there, I generally, from that center hole, what I'll do is I add 7 inches of excess. So I'll come down to the 43, and that's where I'll make my mark here, and then I will use this shape here just to kind of get that nice spaded in there. And what I'll do, I'll just use my hole punch that hole, and then like I said, I'm going to punch that spade at the end. And from there, once you get your holes punched, bevel those edges and run over it with a slicker and some Tokonol. Again, it's a 1 layer, so it's not that you have to, you're really just going to lay these fibers down, and it gives it a nicer look. Kind of rounded edges, and it gives it a pretty nice look in there. So I'm going to punch these holes, get this thing completed, and we'll see how we turn out. All right, so here it is. We got it finished up, got the holes punched, got my end punch. I forgot, my buddy asked for a hickey on the end of it. That can't be the name of it, but I went ahead and threw it on there. He had one on another belt. If you got a better name for it, or an actual name for it, let me know. I do live in South Carolina, so hickey might be the way to go. I've always known it as something different. But anyway, here is our project. I hope yours turned out great. Even if it's not perfect, it's still a very solid thing that you can make, and it's not a whole lot of stitching. There is some work on these edges and getting the holes punched and everything along there. Getting this buckle right does take some time, but overall you get to use some of the basic leather working skills, and you can really put together a nice product. That's something that'll last quite some time. And again, this is probably the best gift that I hand out to all my buddies. It tends to be a 40th birthday present that I give some of my buddies. So yeah, it's a great gift. Hopefully yours came out good. If I skipped over something, my editing department isn't the best because it's me. But yeah, if I missed something, shoot me a question. I'll try to put a link to everything in the description, or at least a list of supplies and also the sizes and the widths and the lengths and everything that I put in to help you know, decipher through everything there. But here it is. Hopefully it came out great. If you got any questions, let me know. I appreciate you learning and building with me. And if there's some projects you'd like to see, shoot me a message and see if I can throw them together for you. If you like what I'm doing, please hit that subscribe, hit the like, throw me a comment. All the beautiful stuff that you need to do to help this thing grow. And I do appreciate your time, and glad you spent it with me. So hope your project turned out great, and we'll see you soon.